ECO 9.3 just hit the streets this week, and with it comes some pretty nice high-profile features I'll go over, some rather buried and subtle changes which are almost equally as nice, and maybe one or two disappointments I was hoping to see in this release. So let's take a look. First is the new rent feature that I talked about a little bit in my previous video on eco updates. But this feature is now fully incorporated, out of experimental mode, and is now a default in the part of any server update. This rent, I think, opens up a lot of possibilities for real estate moguls and opens up a lot of opportunities for long-running servers where new players joining months into an existing playthrough can rent a room in a building and start gaining immediate skill points. It probably also opens up a lot of collaborative gameplay for folks wanting to formulate subgroups and create some kind of apartment complex that they all share. Maybe even the stores on the bottom of the floor are mutually managed in some way, that sort of thing. An equally interesting part of this whole rent thing is that it's not limited to just housing. Vehicles can also be rented. This is going to be tremendous. I see over and over new players coming into the server wanting to dig out a basement for their house, but don't have a skid steer. And to be honest, that activity of digging hundreds of blocks of dirt or chipping out equally large amounts of rock by hand is only fun for a little while. Once you've used a skid steer, you become kinda spoiled. There's also the possibility of the government or individuals making trucks for rent to help new players out until they can buy one. I'm sure the community is going to come up with all kinds of unique ways to utilize this rent feature that I can't even imagine right now, so it's going to be really good. The other big feature was a lot of additions to the tailoring skill. They've added both cotton and nylon as new materials to be able to make new things for the tailoring profession, and adjusted several other things around it, including some new crafting tables. With the cotton also comes a new crop and opportunities for farmers to go grow the cotton, sell that to tailors. Now, one little word of caution with the cotton, and that's that it won't spawn automatically on already existing worlds. So if you want cotton on your current server, you'll need to have the admin run the give command to introduce some seeds into your world just to get that whole cotton production thing up and running. There's also some other new items you make just from this cotton and nylon, including some nice tier 4 carpets, some skill-specific clothing outfits, and gloves. Right now, these are pure cosmetic items with the clothes, but there's also intended gameplay for these to provide boosts for players in various ways. So right now I think they're just setting all that up in advance with the tailoring skill. But also, kind of interesting with the tailoring is that the industry vehicles will now need this new nylon instead of just raw cellulose fiber, which is also a nice change. What I'm not sure about is exactly where the nylon comes from.
I don't know. Do you?
Raw products come from the oil industry, but one of the new tailoring tables is a spin melter, which sounds like a thing that could make nylon. And it's said that, in their information anyway, nylon is high polluting. But they're not done with the tailoring. There's also another new tailoring thing. Wool yarn and wool carpets are also something that can be crafted, but leaves me with a similar question as before. Where exactly is this wool coming from?
The uncertainty.
Now, my guess is that one of the existing animals on the server, like the mountain goat, will probably drop some of this wool when it's processed, like the rest of the animal is when you take it to the butcher. So not only is this wool adding something for the tailors, but it's including a whole other skill set, which is one of the things I really like about what they're doing with this eco game. They're always looking for ways to increase the collaboration amongst players, which is a cornerstone of this game, and which makes it separate from a lot of other multiplayer games. You don't win by beating others through competition. You truly win and get the best experience by maximizing the amount of cooperation and trust amongst players, which is a really different concept and hard for people to get their head around. I mean, most games, especially ones that have an economic component, are based on outproducing the other players, beating them into the ground with unrealistic profit margins, or cornering the market on some particular commodity. But Eco is really different, and that's why I like it. It's just got a different sauce on it. But back to our wool. Even though I think right now we'll be getting wool off the rams or something, it does beg the question about future animal husbandry and the raising of sheep for wool, which would be really cool and give the farmers yet another thing to grow as food for animals. But I'm purely theory crafting about the sheep, and even though I couldn't find anything distinct about this on their current roadmap, it seems they are open to all kinds of possibilities like this one. The Excavator got some attention in this update also by allowing for an optional, simpler control setup and modified the suspension to prevent it tilting up and down while excavating, or I guess making it less bouncy. Personally, I don't think I'm a big fan of either of these changes. I liked the fact that the Excavator required a little bit of extra skill and practice to become good with it and efficient with it, and to be able to use it like a true pro. It was one of the few things that you operated in the game that was a little complicated.
Complex systems can sometimes behave in ways that are entirely unpredictable.
And I like that. Maybe it's okay what they did, and I'll need to play with the Excavator to see what I really think, but if they dumbed it down to the point where it doesn't have that same sense of improving your skill with use, then I might have to give this one a thumbs down. They added a couple more forms to the corrugated steel, and went through a whole host of optimizations for improvements to the game. Folks that have played the game for a while know that your FPS would degrade over time during a given play session, but they've apparently addressed some of that. Optimized the process for loading chunks into the game, improvements to opening and closing UI windows, which I assume includes the economy viewer, which can take a long time to load once lots of stores and lots of products become available. There were several other optimizations that they did, and anything in this area to improve the performance and operation of the game is really welcome by everybody. It helps the long-running servers with lots of builds hopefully run a little better, and helps those with lower-end computers be able to run the game a little smoother. There was a really long list of bug fixes, which I'm happy to see, but was also a little bit surprised about. For the most part, the game operates without a lot of game-breaking problems, and I'm definitely not going to go over all the bug fixes, but there were a couple that stuck out to me. One had to do with the demographics and a crash that happens when making modifications there, which our server experienced, and hopefully they fixed that one. It also seems they fixed a bug having to do with moving your store and it displaying duplicate versions of its contents in the economy viewer. I know that was a big problem for a lot of people, and even though it could be resolved with a server restart, in general, it was a pain in the neck. Particularly because the duplicated store would display whatever the contents and prices were before you moved it, and would trick a lot of people into thinking that you were buying or selling something that wasn't even available, or at the location that was selling it at. There was a whole host of balance changes where they dialed up or dialed down the amount of labor calories required for different kinds of crafting. But buried in here, I found a new fish stew recipe that seems similar to the meaty stew and can use charred fish as an alternative for charred meat. As small as this item seems, I think it's great they started to give a little love to the fishing industry. And meaty stew, as a cooked item, was a really high-calorie, good nutrition food that was a perfect protein complement to several salads that were available at that same level of cooking. But meaty stew was always the thing that seemed to be in short supply relative to the salads, so I'm really glad they introduced another item that should be a high-protein food. One final note about something that was particularly troublesome to me was a change or fix to the radius of the elevator call post so it can interact with the industrial elevator a little better. I had a heck of a time trying to find the exact place to put down a call post that would work with that industrial elevator. So I'm glad they made this a little bit better because it was a huge problem. Let me know what you think about all these changes, or if you've already been playing this patch, I'd love to hear what your thoughts are. This game definitely has some layers, so just drop what you think in the comments, and I'll be talking to you later.